Whoa, dude. Oh man, I've always wanted to play a 7-string guitar. Imagine all the crazy chords you could play with it. Now I think it's safe to say that most of our first experiences with a 7 or an 8-string guitar went something like that. And of course there's nothing wrong with it, it's a natural response. Hey, we have this extra super low string, let's just use the crap out of it. And come on, we have to be honest, sometimes it's fun just to every once in a while go. And that's fine and all, but if you're like me, you eventually start to wonder, what are some other things that I can do with this extra low note on my guitar? Now, adding strings isn't actually anything new, it's been happening for centuries. In fact, if you check out Rob Scallon's latest video, he actually features a Baroque guitar that has technically 9 strings, but 4 of them are tied together, much like a 12 string. So really it only had 5 strings, or 5 usable strings. And even beyond that, I've seen plenty of classical guitars that have had 7 strings, 8 strings, 9 strings, even up to 10 strings on them instead of just 6 strings. But eventually at some point, 6 strings became the standard for guitars, and that's how we know them today. So because of that, there's plenty of chord vocabulary for 6 strings. For example, you got open chords, as well as bar chords. But one thing I've noticed is that there's not a lot of material out there that shows you vocabulary involving the low B string, assuming that it's tuned to B. So I wanted to make this quick video just to explain some of the things that I've figured out trying to find some different types of chords to play that involve using this low B. Because as a guitar player, I learned by the cage system, so I like having chords that you can play on the D string, chords that you play on the A string, and chords that you can play on the E string. So naturally, I also want to have chords that you can play off the 7 string. So then, if the situation ever arises, I can just go down to the low note. Or if I want to create a specific bass line, I could use chords that use that low 7 string. Also, not to mention, if you had a 7-string acoustic, which I don't, but I'll just use my electric. If you have a 7-string acoustic, you could actually play pieces like Pachelbel's Canon without tuning down to drop D, like most people with 6-string guitars have to do. Now, first of all, the easiest thing you could do to get a lot of cool 7-string chords using all the strings is actually to drop tune your 7th string to drop A. Because when you do that, because the low 7th string is the same thing as that A string, if you know your A-shaped vocabulary really well, like minor, major chords, all you have to do is add the 5th and the root to those chords, which are supplied by those low E and B strings. And that just serves as a way to kind of beefing them up and give them a little more low end than you normally would hear from a guitar. However, that's not really learning the neck, you're just adding what you already know, just as a lower octave. So in order to learn in B standard, which is how most 7 strings are tuned, the first thing I would say to do is actually learn all of your scales, including that 7th string. So no matter what scale it is, we can just start with like a major scale. Let's start with C major. So you go up like normal, but then you add. You want to figure out where all those notes are on that 7th string. So then you know where all the chord, or not the chord tones, the scale tones are. Beyond that, you can also do that with arpeggios. So say, let's play a E flat major arpeggio. So we could actually just start that on the 7th string itself. So E flat here, 4th fret. And try to figure out where all those chord tones are. From there, you can go to the 3rd of that chord. So the 3rd of E flat is going to be G. So you're going to skip up to the G on here and try to figure out where all those notes are again. Then go up to the 5th and figure it out again. Or you could play like this. Now let's get into actually playing chords, or playing triads on the 7th string. Now you could just play them like you would normally, like on the E string. Like that, although on the 7th string it gets really low and it'll sound like this. Now as you get higher up on the neck, it sounds good to play chords like that, but lower, like, to me that's just really low and it's kind of muddy. So one thing that I do when I play chords on 7 strings, I'll do something similar that you do with the 8 or the E string, is when you play chords like this. You notice I'm skipping the A string and I'm actually going up to directly up to the higher notes. And this is the same reason why bass players don't play chords on the low notes. Often when bass players play chords, they'll play way up here, because when it's way up here, it's less muddy. When it's down here, it's hard to tell what the chord is because it's so low. So some shapes I have for you. Let's start with just D major. So starting with the low bass note D right here, 3rd fret, 7th string. There's kind of 2 ways that I figured work really well as far as playing these chords. What I could do is actually just play a straight up triad starting on the A string, and then just add the octave lower with the 7th string. So right there, it looks a lot more painful than it actually is, but it's 3rd fret on the low B, you're skipping the E string, you're playing 5th fret on A, 4th fret on D, and 2nd fret on G, because that effectively gives you D, F sharp, A, which is what you need for a D major chord. Or another thing you could do is actually, it's kind of hard to play this with a pick. What we can also do is actually bring that D note up an octave to 3rd fret on the high B string. Then you get that chord. So for right now, I'm just going to focus on this first shape. So the next thing you could do is try to figure out inversions. So try to go, since this is the root, now let's go to the 3rd, F sharp. So again, the notes of a D major chord are D, F sharp, and A. So from here, you have to find the next F sharp, which is right here. You just go up an octave, and then A, and then D. So that's going to be 3rd, which is 7th fret on the 7th string. Skip E, and then play 9th fret on A, then 7, 7 on D and G. So that's just an inversion of that first chord. Then let's go to the 5th, which is A. So find A on the B string, which is going to be 10th fret. And then we're going to go, we can do the same thing, just go up an octave. And then D, and then F sharp. And after that, you're just back to the original shape. So that's for the major chord, and then you could do the same thing for the minor chord, which gives you these shapes. And then that's all 3 shapes. Now, if you've watched my other videos regarding chords, I always say it's really helpful to be able to play chord scales, which is essentially just going up a scale. Playing all the chords in that scale. So you can also do that starting with the 7th string. So say we'll play D major. We start with this. Next one's E major, or E minor. F sharp minor. G major. And A major. Then B minor. Getting a little cramp up here. And then C sharp diminished. And that brings you back to D. So with 7th chords, with the low 7th string, I'd like to kind of mimic what I do with the low E string, which is that shape. But you have to remember, the distance between G and B are different compared to D and G because of how the guitar is tuned. So we have to compensate for that. So instead of playing this shape straight up, which sounds like that, which isn't so good, we're going to play this shape. That'd be a major 7th chord because we have D, C sharp, F sharp, and A. And that sounds kind of nice. You could add the 13 there. And from there you could do the same thing with inversions involving the 7th chord, which would be this. Going to the next inversion. And then next one. And then last one is the really hard one. You're not going to use that one very often. That's a really painful one. And it kind of sounds gnarly anyway. And from there, just do the same thing with the minor shape, which is just going to bring these 2 notes that are on the 4th fret of that first shape I showed you, just bring them down 1. Then you get the minor shape. If you want a minor 7 flat 5, you just flat that top note. And if you want a dominant chord, you just raise the D string note to 4th fret. That gets you a dominant chord. From there, figure out the inversions of those, and then figure out how to play them in a chord scale, and then you get a ton more chords to play with. Now beyond just 7th chords, like I said, this is a major shape, major 7 shape. Now if you want to figure out, hey, where's the 13? Well, A is the 5th. So for the 13th, you just bring this up the 4th fret. And you get more of a jazzy chord. You want to try the flat 5, you just do this. Let's see, how about the 9? Where would the 9 be? 9 would be E, so you could just play E right here. May try a minor 9 chord. You can get some interesting sus chord shapes like this. Resolve that back to the triad. So there's just a ton of stuff you can do. That's why I really like exploring this on the 7th string, because there's so many different chords you could play that you just wouldn't expect. Now, one more cool thing that I figured out, now this is more on the money side, but if you drop tune your guitar, you can actually get triads by playing this shape. Now this would be a B flat major chord. So because all you're doing, this is B flat, you go up to the 3rd of the chord and you just drop that down an octave, which is same fret now because we're in drop tuning. So then it's going to be this. And if you want to make that a minor chord, you just lower that bass note. Now when you're in a clean tone like that, you have to be careful of the tone because it can't be too low or it'll get too muddy. But if you're on a heavy tone, what I realized is that it actually sounds pretty cool and gives you something new to play. It actually sounds pretty heavy that way, and you're playing full-on triads rather than just playing power chords the whole time. But anyway, that's all the time I have for today. I hope you learned something new, got some cool new chords into your playing, or at least some ideas for some potential new chords into your playing. And the main thing I hope you take away from this is you could really think about extended range guitars in a completely different way. Like, almost think of it like a new instrument. Because when I first got a 7th string, of course, I was just like that, where I just said, okay, I'm going to play this like a 6th string, but I'm just going to play that 7th string every once in a while, just add a little beef to my playing, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a totally legitimate way to handle the 7th string guitar. But I think it's also cool to expand a little bit and think, wow, I can actually think of this as just a 7-string guitar. Like, instead of thinking, oh, it's a 6-string with just a fancy lower string, I could just be like, no, it's a 7-string guitar. It's got all these other strings that I can mess around with and play different chords with. But on that note, I'm going to head out. So thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of that. Let me know in the comments what you think, or if you have any suggestions for future videos, that'd be cool too. And another thing, I might as well do some shameless self-promotion on the side right here since it's the end of the video. My band's album, it came out a few months ago, Dark Matter. If you haven't checked that out, please check it out because we put a lot of work into that and we're really proud of it. And we'd really like to know what you guys think, so I'll leave a link in the description, check that out, and on that note, I will talk to you next time. See ya!